Yes, folks, it's college football season. Let's wake up the echoes of the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Hello, sports fans. It's August 29th, 2024. Welcome to Cleats by Dre. I'm Dre. Let's talk some sports. I'm back from vacation. I've got a doozy of a pod for you. We're going to preview the Notre Dame Fighting Irish football season. We're breaking Cleats by Dre records with this one. My first guests, my business school buds, my sports business club VPs, James and Mike, will join me, lifelong Irish fans. We're also going to break some records on time. This one goes long, but I think it's worth the squeeze. I mentioned in the first episode, we're not just New York sports here. I'm going to cover the bases I feel I can cover. We'll talk about Mike and James's Notre Dame roots, how they're passing that on to their next of kin, talk about where Notre Dame fits as a program these days in the national scene, and then break down the season storylines, the roster, make some predictions for both this Saturday versus Texas A&M and on the season. We'll sprinkle in some pop quizzes and history along the way. I guarantee, everyone can find something in here that may make them sound smarter next sports debate at the bar this weekend. All right, brace yourselves, steel yourselves. This is not your rosiest prognostication of the Irish. But look, let's get into it. I'll throw it right to myself. Enjoy. Welcome, folks. Let's talk some Notre Dame Fighting Irish football. Lucky episode number 13 of Cleats by Dre. Yeah, it makes sense. Let's talk about the Irish. So we have a season preview coming up. We'll do a light around the horn with an outlook for the season, some of the major storylines, and make some predictions for week one versus A&M and for the season. I'm honored to be joined by two of my esteemed buds, James and Mike. They're both fellow business school alums, MBAs as myself. Also leadership chairs of the award-winning Sports Business Club during our time at ND, where we had such notable achievements such as organizing a bus trip to the Michigan night football game in Ann Arbor and placing 6 out of 10 in a case competition at San Diego State University.
Yes, you were just off the podium. Just close.
We were close, just 6, right? Just the second bronze, they call it. Yeah, the topic there was, could Mark Cuban find a way into the college football playoff mess? We finished 6th. Real credentials here. What country was the winning team from, guys? Do you remember?
They were from Oxford.
Yeah,
England.
City, School of Oxford, England. So go figure. These are the credentials. But look, I'm a fledgling of my Notre Dame fandom. Started in 2010. These guys have the Irish, the Fighting Irish in their roots, in their bloodlines, plastered on their bedroom walls growing up. So we're going to go at it together. Now, important to note, too, before I bring them in, both these guys double up on their football religion and following some misery with their teams. James, he's a Texas Ag undergrad. Big weekend coming up for him. He also likes himself some Colorado Rockies in the MLB. So, fortunate. Mike can often be found in both Chicago Bears message boards, as well as trying to make people care about Servite high school football. So, fellas, welcome to Cleats. How are we doing today?
Thanks, Trey. Doing great, man.
I'm good. Yeah, I would only add I was a varsity letterman for Servite High School football. So not only am I a fan, but also somebody that put the bucket on back in the day.
There you go. Do you have that jacket still? You have the letter still?
It's in my parents' closet. Might be a little snug around the waist, but loose in the biceps area still. So I think I can still wear it.
All right. Well, it's in my pod backlog. We'll go in on California high school football. Let's do it, bud.
Episode 26.
2006. Love you. All right, let's hear about some of your experiences with ND football. So first, let's start. What's your first memory with ND football? Your first experience? Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, so 1986, my dad worked in the oil and gas industry. He was working up in Prudhoe Bay, kind of north of Alaska. He found himself a transfer down to Southern California. So first grade Mike, we head to Southern California, my first ND football game. Notre Dame with Servite High alum Steve Berline quarterbacking the Fighting Irish, go into the LA Coliseum and pull off a furious fourth quarter rally to beat USC. That actually kind of that's my first game. And then 87, the team goes 8-3. Timmy Brown wins the Heisman Trophy. we lose to the Texas Ags, I believe, in the Cotton Bowl that year. Uh,
Yep.
and then 88 is probably that's probably the fondest memory of all for Notre Dame fans. And I was 10 I was kind of coming into my 10th year on the planet, and that's as good as it got as a Notre Dame fan, and it's a good time to have a great season. So enjoyed the national title season as a 10-year-old.
Man, I love you're old enough to experience the last title. Envious when I say that. James, how about you? Your first experience ND football?
Well, I was going through old box scores, looking at Notre Dame's history, and I realized I went to my first Notre Dame game when I was 3 months old in Boulder. The Irish were playing the University of Colorado and won 27-3. My mother went to Notre Dame, so came out of the womb wearing gold and blue. But similar to Mike, my memories really start. They say your memories start when you're about 5, and I was 5 years old for the 1988
You,
national
you
championship
guys.
season. And, I remember Tony Rice, and just going back and looking at those stats. I mean, college football was a different sport. Tony Rice in 11 games had 70 completions. That's just over 6 per game. And that was your national championship team. And, there was my most vivid memory, and I'll kick it back to you, was shortly thereafter, the 1991 Orange Bowl against the University of Colorado. Born and raised in Colorado. I'm in a house full of Colorado Buff fans at a party, all these yuppies. Can I cuss on this show?
Oh yeah, we're for
Uh,
adults and for kids too, but
Um,
they could hear it.
bunch of yuppie assholes. Rocket Ishmael, end of the game. I mean, this is another one of those college football games.
Yeah.
It's 9-3, and Rocket takes it to the house, and a punt with 40 seconds left, phantom clip, called back. All the yuppie assholes go nuts. I'm wearing my Notre Dame like plastic hutch helmet and everything. I kick a wall so hard that I faint, and I woke up in my bed later that night.
Jesus.
So I've always been a bit of a sore loser, and Notre Dame has broken my heart many, many times.
Well, I wonder, are you guys, the fact that you both remember the 88 title, does that make you want the next one even more? Like, I always wonder, like Tom Brady always said that, like he wanted the next one more because he kept winning. I
Yeah,
don't
it's
know.
just been it's hard to believe. It's been 35 years.
It's wild.
I would definitely say for those of us that came of age in 88 and then the 93 season where Notre Dame may have been the best team, I think those fans have a different level of what outstanding is. I feel like some of the other NBA guys that kind of became Notre Dame fans as part of the institution, I think that, you know, playoff appearances, very good years is, I'm not saying it, there's more acceptance of Notre Dame
Mhm.
being not the best, whereas
Yeah.
I feel like older fans or longer term fans are pining for actually true excellence. Like we want to play the best teams and beat them regularly.
Yeah. That's crazy how it works. I mean, my first experience is 2010. We beat Purdue in the first week, 23-12. We had some fun guys in that team, Michael Floyd, Kyle Rudolph, but it was my, you guys know I went to Duke, and yeah, we stormed the field 3 times in 4 years. We only won 8 games, but we tore down a goalpost every time we did. But just stepping into South Bend and the parking lot, the tailgate stadium is a different experience. So thankful to be part of this. And you guys both hit on the joy question. I think you mentioned the title game. Let's jump right to the despair question, right? When has Notre Dame brought you the most despair? James, you go first then.
The 93 season, when I was 10, was so hard. The Florida State game was like the biggest game of probably the decade. I mean, there were not many college football games on TV back in those days. It's hard to believe now that ESPN shows basically every single game.
Yeah.
And the build up to that game, how huge it was. Notre Dame wins. And then the next week, they lose to Boston College at home on a field goal. national title hopes dashed. I wept and wept and wept.
I was
I remember that game. I was a 9-year-old in New York. Like, and honestly, I was a Charlie Ward fan. I'll be honest. You know, exciting player to watch. But
He was the man.
what a wild
Basketball,
Chaz
football.
Ward was a precursor to modern college football, right? I mean, you
Nick
look at that
Sponge.
old Florida State offense. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
Charlie Ward could do things dynamically in the pass and kind of the moving the pocket game that, I mean, I feel like he was made. I mean, certainly there's been a lot of great quarterbacks, but I can remember just as a fan being like, how do you stop Charlie Ward? He can do it
Yeah.
all.
Yeah.
Doesn't get enough flowers, I think. Mike, were you going to comment on that or add your own too?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of despair, I guess what I would say is just, if you think from 88 to 93 is kind of the salad days of Notre Dame football, I think what was tough is, so kind of, the peak of life fandom is around kind of like high school through college, maybe up until you have kids or something like that. So like watching kind of like the fall of the empire, it was be like, come on, we just got to get out of September without a loss because that back then that was your only chance. And it was like every year, like Michigan State or like you just couldn't. We went like 7, 8 years you couldn't get out of September. So just and then obviously Holtz departs, Davey takes over. We're roaming the desert for many years looking for a good coach until Kelly showed up. So I think just just the wanting to be elite, but just kind of seeing every season not play out as you'd like was just as one. I don't think it was a singular point in time. It was just like every September being like, God damn it, we're not going to win a title again this year.
General malaise. See, I have one moment for you, Mike, and James, you might be thinking of this too. His name is Dane Christ, and the game was South Florida.
Oh yeah.
And I've never been outside of a shower hearing a man, you could say cuss, but I mean, that was an awful game in of
Well,
itself.
I have to say, and so that was a crystallized moment because I was like, I only get to go to this school for 2 years as a grad student.
Mm-hmm.
And like, it was where you had to get out of September to be like a viable contender. So to just be like, shit, this is just it's just going to be another mediocre season. And then of course to realize the next year, Notre Dame had kind of its most magical run.
You're out.
There's some theme in my sports fandom life,
Yeah.
That was the game from hell with like the 2-hour delay, and it was a mess.
Oh my God. Fumbles, the failed onside kicks. Yeah, that was wild.
That team was really good too. That 20,
I know.
I mean, obviously they went 12-0 the next year. They had Mike Floyd on that. They had Mike Floyd on that team. They had Eifert, they had a very experienced O-line. Teo, I mean, much of the defense that came to be one of the better defenses in the country. And they had Aaron Lynch on the defensive line.
Aaron Lynch, yeah.
That team was they just punched well below their weight for the year. I think that team should have been closer to an 11-1 or 10-2 type team.
They didn't have the quarterback, right? I mean, that's pretty important.
Well, such is reflective of Dane Chris was a 5-star quarterback, and people thought he was, Dane Chris was Uyunglele before Uyunglele. I said his name correctly twice.
What a comparison!
I'm not happy you pronounce it anymore. Let's call it there.
People thought he was a better pro prospect than Clausen. When he was early at Notre Dame.
Similar career arc too. It seems. All right, let's go into my despair moment. Sure. I was going to say that actually the title game, the 2013 title game when we were there, Mike, and I mean that was such a stomping. I mean, I talked about in a previous episode like the excitement an hour leading up to that, but at a certain point I just felt uncomfortable being there. We were being mocked by the Alabamian behind us for booing the refs, and so we'd boo every play, and then they something would go against them, and he'd go, boo referee, boo referee, boo. Uncomfortable. So really rapid change from like, yeah, we're gonna win a title to this is bad. So
well, it felt kind of hopeless at that game because it was just the talent disparity was so stark. And I remember thinking like, are we ever going to get athletes like this? Like we're never, was Derrick Henry on that team? I can't even keep the
Eddie
Alabama.
Lacy. Eddie Lacy.
Lacey, thank you. I can't even keep these
Oh yeah, Eddie
Alabama
Lacy.
All-Americans
DJ
straight.
Yeldon, yeah.
Who
Yeah.
was
But
there? Did they have Amari Cooper or Jerry
Yep.
Jeudy or
I think Cooper. I think Cooper was a freshman. I mean, that was still AJ McCarron, their offensive line, guys like Barrett Jones and DJ Fluker. Like, that was one of the best Alabama teams, even though they lost
that
one.
game was a if Notre Dame plays tight in that game, I think the perception is like great season. This is early Kelly era.
Mhm.
We're a few players away. I
Mhm.
think that game illuminated that actually like the gap to win a national title was actually quite a bit more dramatic than I think I went into the game understanding. And so it did actually provide like a windshield of like getting here in the next 5 or 6 years will be really tough.
Yeah. Well, that's a good segue to like, what's the gap now? Um, I actually have a quick life question before we even get there. You're both dads of young kids. Surprise question. Do your kids watch the games with you? Do they get into it? Do they watch with you? James, I'm curious from you.
so I have a boy and two girls. My oldest is the boy, he's 7, and he's curious. He likes watching highlights.
Yeah.
Getting him to sit down and watch a game is a bit of a challenge,
Sure.
but he wants to get on YouTube and watch the big plays. And I think Notre Dame translates just so well on TV. I think like as a kid, you see the gold helmets, like it just like Notre Dame pops, and I
Yeah.
think kids kind of gravitate towards it. So he knows how much I love it, and so he's interested. Of course, I like gave him a jersey, and so
Yeah.
he's getting into it. But it's probably for a whole nother pod. But kids, man,
Yeah.
they've got so many
Yeah.
distractions. We had boredom. We had the Cubs on WGN, and we had the Irish on NBC.
Or go stare at a wall in our room.
Yeah.
Mike, I know your oldest plays, right? But I mean, in Notre Dame fandom, how are the kids taking into it?
Yeah, I mean my two boys they're definitely into it. They'll watch a game, but a big difference. I don't know if you guys have seen this, but I used to be like in the fall, whatever sport I would play. I played that sport. I played one sport.
Mhm.
My oldest son is playing tennis, basketball, football, and baseball this fall. And then my
Jeez.
second is playing soccer and football, and he's only 7.
Mhm.
So, I mean, I think one of the challenges is like, on the weekends, you're just like, you squeeze them in,
Yeah.
and then Notre Dame plays a fair number of night games. And if those games run late enough, like we let them stay up for like the Ohio State game last year, they were very into it. But um, so yeah, they're coming along. They'll be part of the tribe. But I would say like watching every single game, like we catch what we catch.
Yeah.
Joey,
Yeah.
do your boys watch games?
Yeah, it's a mix. And I'll do another pod on this in general. Like I got him to watch the Super Bowl by doing like a big game grid, like and we kind of quote unquote bet on some of the plays. I watch a lot of Notre Dame games on my phone, on YouTube TV, in a different room. Um, Duke basketball, I would try to get him to Duke UNC watch. I'd have them paint their face blue. They come out of it rooting for North Carolina. Like, they do kind of things, it's kind of needle dad, but they're young still. But I think there's an element of, like you're saying, James, just other things and other ways they get the content, and there's so much content. But I was curious about that. All right, let's start talking some more ND. So first question is, where does Notre Dame fit in the national scene right now? What's our tier? Who else is on our tier? And I don't expect anyone to think we're the top tier. We haven't won, but just curious, when you guys think of the other schools and where we kind of slide in on, where do you slot us in at? Mike, you want to take a first pass?
Yeah, I mean, the transfer portal makes like preseason ranking super dynamic, right? Like what you're returning, what they're like, for example, Louisville put together a very nice team last year, kind of mostly through the transfer portal. So um my personal thought is like 7 seems reasonable. But
Hmm.
and yeah, I don't want to step on anything for later, but I
No, go
do
ahead.
think like this is the third year of the Freeman era. Third year is a big year for Notre Dame coaches, but I think this is the third year where we have what I would consider an incomplete offensive roster.
Mhm.
And I think with an incomplete offensive roster, I don't think it's possible to be competitive at the highest levels of college football.
Right. We got a thesis coming out. I like it. We'll dive into that. James, what do you think, like big picture, like where the program kind of sits?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because it's chum in the waters for the national media. They love to say like Notre Dame isn't relevant, but
Mhm.
they'll spend 2,000 words writing about how Notre Dame isn't relevant. It's like kind of making the point that Notre Dame's relevant. And there was a school of thought that, because it's been 35 years since a national title, these kids who are getting recruited, they have no memory of Notre Dame being excellent. But
Hmm.
I guess it kind of goes to my earlier point. There's still something a bit magical,
Mhm.
and I know that sounds schmaltzy that kids gravitate towards, and I think their parents oftentimes remember, and then it's the type of place you'd want your kids to go to school. So there's still the allure there. I think, people are quick to forget. Alabama went through the desert. They had a horrible 1990s. Like they thought
Mhm.
they were dead. They
Mhm.
might be going into another desert. It's not the easiest place to recruit to just on its own. USC's had its deserts. So I think it still sits among the blue bloods of the sport. It attracts that amount of
Mhm.
attention nationally, national fan base.
Mhm.
They're still recruiting at an elite level, but at some point you got to get over the hump. You got to win a champ.
Yeah. And so that's where I kind of like I did some tiers, and it's not just based on this season, just like past five, past 10 seasons. I have three tiers in the top nine. I have three juggernauts, and I have Georgia there. I have Alabama there. I have Ohio State there just because they're good every year. Like you mentioned, Alabama had a desert. I don't think Ohio State's really had a desert. So I know some people would take umbrage with like, them being that. I have them as the juggernauts.
I object to Alabama's inclusion in that.
So let me do my nine and then you come
Okay,
back
go
to me.
ahead. Go with your tiers, but
Yeah.
one objection noted.
So then I have a recent champs tier because I feel like you got to give some weight to that. And so I have LSU, Clemson, and Michigan there. I hate to say it. And then I have a consistently there tier, number three, and I put Oklahoma, ND, and Oregon in there. And I'm like, those nine, and then, angry fans everywhere else, right? Penn State, Florida, you're probably saying A&M, UT, Wisconsin, like there's a lot of other angry ones, but I feel like that consistently there tier, I feel like those teams, at least the last 5 to 10 years, have been consistently good. Um, but that's my nine. But right off the bat, Mike, so Bama not being in the juggernauts tier.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say like, I mean, go through like historical analysis, but you lose a legendary coach, the maintenance of that standard is it's not often that you're able to hand off and maintain standard. And so I feel like Alabama would be a program that I would say is, I would put them in their own tier of like wait and see. They certainly have recent success to build upon. Um,
Mhm.
the dynamics of the sport's changing based on how you fund a program. Alabama's not the wealthiest state in the union, so I think it's an Ohio State Georgia led sport right now, and I think Alabama will. They certainly have a track record, but I'm not convinced that absent Saban they can maintain it. They as guards mentioned, like Alabama struggled to be a dominant program in the SEC prior to Saban's arrival.
So you're going forward looking only. You're going like the stock market, evaluating the stock.
No, I'm just saying I don't think Alabama's making the playoffs this year. I mean, I think
But
I
I'm saying go back the last 5 years, the last 10 years, Alabama, their record is up there with that anyone.
I just how can you keep Georgia and Ohio State who have consistency at the head coaching position? They're well-funded programs. Like I mean, I'm just saying I don't think
Okay.
I think I mean there's always more value in looking ahead than looking behind. The
Yeah.
behind is already kind of that's known information. I think Alabama there's a lot to be understood as to whether or not this people are very high on their coach, but there's a lot to understand of whether or not this program can keep at the level they've kept at.
Well, it's a good point. Again, you could have a whole nother podcast on this. Is like, how do you separate the broader big picture program from the coach?
Yeah.
And some programs are the coach.
Mhm.
And Nick Saban was, in my opinion, the best college football coach in history.
Mhm.
And you look at some of these blue bloods, if you botch a coaching hire, it's minimum 5 years of desert. Like if you miss on a hire,
Mhm.
and that's happened. I mean, you look at the list of blue bloods, USC has churned through
Mhm.
Michigan until, I mean, you think of some of these just horrible coaches at these huge programs.
Florida,
Um,
Florida State. I mean,
Florida,
programs that were very recently regularly top 5 annually.
yeah. I mean, we're talking programs with every built-in advantage. Texas has had some really bad hires.
Georgia was mediocre for decades, right? Mark
It,
Richt, like
so mediocre, and Georgia has every built-in advantage. That
right.
state churns out talent. They
Yeah.
don't have to compete against anyone within their state. They have pipelines into Florida. There's plenty of money in Atlanta, and they finally have they got it because they got their coach. And
Yeah.
Notre Dame botched like 5 coaches in a row.
Yeah.
I would say the only thing I would say is like you're missing a tier. I think like the rising power tier. Like I think you would have to include Texas as a potential rising power. And I don't know if Washington would qualify. I think they lost their coach, so I don't think they would be in there. But Texas looks like they've joined the right conference. They've got a coach that looks like
The
they're
right
built for
coach?
success.
Yeah.
Like I feel like Texas could be a rising program that would be that certainly if you had a 10th program, it would definitely be Texas at this time.
And I hate
And I think
Texas.
Elko's a really good coach too. I think
Do you want
Texas,
to take
Texas,
umbrage?
Texas, Texas A&M.
Bitter rival. You want to take umbrage to that, or
No, I mean they've got
resources? Yeah.
like Georgia. Well, Texas has a lot of built-in advantages. They have more money than the rest of the SEC minus A&M combined. A&M could outbuy the rest of the SEC combined as well. But yeah, I think the one challenge Texas has is everyone recruits in Texas, and you've got like 13 Division I schools.
Yeah.
But they still should get their pick of the litter, and you miss on hires and you're going to go through some rough times. I mean, Charlie Strong was
Yeah.
brutal. Tom Herman looked good for a little while.
Mhm.
That fell flat on its face, and they had to like settle on Sark. That's what's so weird about these coaching things. Saban was not Alabama's first choice. They wanted Rich Rodriguez. Like, talk about light. I mean, just luck handing you something.
Yeah.
Like that makes this sport insane. Is like you got to get lucky.
The sport is insane right now too.
And Elko is thought of as a very good hire. And I think A&M with Texas coming in the SEC, A&M needs Elko to be a good hire.
Absolutely.
But also
Absolutely.
guys that look like good hires don't necessarily, like churn out. Like it is a wild sport. Let's look. All right. Objection noted and rising tier noted for next time. Let's focus more on this season, what's going on. So Cleats by Dre might have some folks relatively new to Notre Dame football. So a quick background and then, what the rankings are saying so far this year. So, Notre Dame's coming off a 10-3 season and then a 9-4 season before that. Marcus Freeman's first 2 seasons, some highs, whether it's the Clemson win a couple years ago, the USC stomping last year against the reigning Heisman Trophy candidate, some lows, right? We lost to Marshall 2 years ago. We lost a bad Stanford team at home 2 years ago. Some losses this year, last year at Louisville, almost lost to Duke.
They lost a game they should have won against Ohio State.
That too.
Yes.
So not finishing. You could look at it both ways, not finishing or pound for pound, we're with Ohio State. In general, not at the champion level standard that we crave. This year, we're turning a lot of starters, taking in new transfers, re-upping on Al Golden at defensive coordinator has been clutch. Absolutely improving their offensive coordinator in Denbrock, right? Like, what Parker was giving us last year.
What a coup, pulling them from LSU.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Heisman winning offense in LSU, cause for optimism. So I'm not the biggest believer in preseason rankings. I don't think you guys are either, but they're interesting just to look at. AP has a 7th. That's actually the second highest we've had over the last 14 years, which I didn't think that would be the case. And actually, we were 5th 2 years ago with Buckner at quarterback coming off, I guess, the Oklahoma State bowl game loss. We were 5th, but 7th is the second highest in 14 years. A lot of optimism. The other stat I'll give, then I'll open the floor. The Athletic, of 28 writers, 60% had us hosting a round 1 playoff game. That's a top 8 seed. 25% put us at seed 9 to 12. So only 15% didn't have us making the playoffs. That's saying this team has a pretty high floor. Does this team have a high floor? So just curious, high level kind of thoughts on the rankings where they fall, how we're being perceived, and we'll get into the reality in a little bit too in terms of what we think.
I think they've got a high floor for two main reasons. The schedule by Notre Dame standards is a breeze. I mean, like anything less than 10-2 is a failed season. And depending how you lose those 2 games, it could be, what could have been type season. And Notre Dame has a really, really good defense. And so you got a schedule that sets up nicely and a good defense. I think that establishes a pretty good floor. And, Mike talked about it earlier. The offense feels incomplete. If they're able to put something together, that's going to determine how far they go. And then do they have the depth if they do make the playoffs to go through that gauntlet? And we haven't seen it yet, from any college team adding all these extra games, how, depth will play a factor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of returning production. Mike, any thoughts on the rankings or what the
Yeah, I mean, I think what I would say is they feel overrated based on their flaw at the offensive line position. But I would say I agree with guards. Like, the defense is elite. I think the cornerback room is like the best cornerback room of maybe my lifetime, in my view. So I agree the defense drives the floor of the roster. But I would just say that similar to the first year under Freeman, like, they're going into a snake pit in game 1. It's going to be a tough win, and if you lose that game, there's a lot of work to, there's games to play. You know what I mean? It's hard to lose your first game, have somewhat of a flaw on the roster, and then run the table. So I don't know enough about the other teams that they're playing against, but I do feel like if I had to guess, if they make the playoff, it would be as a road team in the qualifying round.
Got it. And we'll do predictions too. I wanted a quick segue is a pop quiz because you mentioned overrated, Mike, and so Brett McMurphy from the Action Network, I think he rates 2014 the most overrated preseason teams compared to their final ranking. Can you guys name the number 1 most preseason overrated team?
A&M.
They're 4th.
I think I saw this. Work's been a little slow lately. So I think USD is very overrated regularly.
They're 2nd.
Notre Dame.
Number one's Auburn. Auburn number 1. Wisconsin's 3rd. LSU's 5th. NC's at 17th. Tied with Alabama. So, relatively overrated, but all the good teams are kind of overrated in a certain extent. So backing it up reasonably so. I thought that was interesting. Let's do storylines. And I think you guys are kind of, I hear Mike talking about offensive line. James, you're talking schedule. Either of you guys want to start just like what is a key thing to watch this year? What are you hoping to see just in general with that as the season plays out?
I mean, it's trite. People are talking about it, but year 3 is a big one for a head coach. And I think so many people, Marcus Freeman is such an easy guy to like, and so many people want him to be successful. There's moments where it feels like the job is too big for him, where he's like, and he's still so young. And so I think he's got to prove himself a little bit as a game day coach. Mike pointed to a couple instances where, probably should be Ohio State, got lucky against Duke. I think he got outcoached bad that game.
Mhm.
Um, and so it's going to be the Marcus Freeman story. If he drops a couple of those games where Notre Dame's favorited, like his seat's going to get hot. I mean, fair or not, going back to the insanity of this sport, there are truly 20 programs that think they should be competing for national titles every
Mhm.
single year.
Mhm.
And there's only one national title.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a good, and I'm gonna dive into Freeman in that third year a bit more too, but that's a big one. Mike, what's the storyline for you?
I mean, just building on that, I think, Marcus Freeman's third year, you look at the first year, did not have a quarterback room that was ready to compete at a high level. Last year, that was a very good team, excellent offensive line, did not have a wide receiver room ready to compete at an elite level. And this year, I think Blake Fisher decides to go to the NFL draft. He was supposed to be our left tackle, gets drafted in the third round. We don't provide him a compelling enough financial package just to stay at Notre Dame. I think we're ranked number 7 if Fisher comes back to Notre Dame. And I think we're a number 7 team that looks like a team that might be able to potentially get into the semi and win it. And now we've got a true freshman going into College Station at left tackle. So I think the storyline is, for me, we're ND grads. I have a bunch of family that's ND undergrads. They all hate Kelly. They think Kelly's the worst guy ever. I didn't like Kelly because I didn't think he was a national title level coach, but I feel like Freeman's gotten a lot of passes, and I feel like Freeman's not, to this point, I don't think he's put together what I would consider a great ND offense. And so
Yeah.
I think this year is am I wrong? Like, is this a
No, I
really good
don't I don't
ND
think you're
team,
wrong.
is this a team? Is Marcus Freeman ready to make the leap in the third year or not? Or has he once again kind of failed to put together a full team to win big in a season?
Let's jump into Freeman now. Because I think it is the hot topic. And I'm with you in that he's shown to be reactionary with fixing the offense, right? So he went into his first year, not taking a transfer quarterback. We had Buckner and Pine. That didn't work out great. So the next year, he takes a transfer quarterback, Sam Hartman. Last year, the wide receiver room was a mess, right? And so now he loads up on, changes out the coach. He brings in more wide receivers. The transfer portal, very reactionary. We need proactive, right? We need someone thinking ahead, and it's right in front of us, right? The offensive line, the youngest we've had. We haven't had since 1982. It's the last time we didn't have a senior starter on the offensive line. And so, like, it's not going to be okay if just next year, all right, next year we take some offensive line, transfers or something, or we change out the coach. So, I think if you're talking about the highest class of coaches that win consistently, tacticians, strategists, cold-blooded, Saban, Urban Meyer, I mean, we can name more. And we got to see that. I think from Freeman, we see the rah-rah, we see the players coach. Maybe recruiting, maybe not as high as promised based on what we heard, but
That's the other thing is that the
go ahead.
belief was Kelly could not win at the highest level because he couldn't because he wasn't dynamic on the recruiting trail.
Hmm.
I think we've kind of given Freeman a pass on being like a little bit better. Um, and the reality is like one of the ways to get way better on the recruiting trail is to have a very dynamic season.
Hmm.
And so there's a very ready-made device now to pull together a dynamic season. This roster is good enough to be dynamic, but I feel like it has a fatal flaw. So it's going to be tough to be the best Notre Dame believes they're very well financed as a football program right now, but I think it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough to recruit at the highest level if you're not able to demonstrate kind of highest level performance. There's kind of a chicken and an egg, or there's a flow to recruits based on performance.
All right, there's one other thing on Freeman, another stat I want to bring up, right? So we know about the year three bump with Notre Dame head coaches, right? Four head coaches have won titles in their third year. Holtz, Devine, Parsegian, Leahy, Brian Kelly got close in year three. Um, the thing they different than Freeman, they were all head coaches before they came to Notre Dame. That's a difference, right? You got to grow into this job. And what I did is I looked across this is the Cleats by Dre original analysis all across college football the last 50 years. There's only three coaches that have won a title within their first 3 years of being a head coach anywhere. Yeah, any guess? I think any guesses? Any shots at it?
Kirby Smart.
No, he was like year five.
Okay.
He's
So you
close.
said three head coaches that have won a title in
With
their first 3 years ever as a head
ever
coach.
as a head coach the last 50 years.
All right, let me just speedball a couple guesses. Did Dabo do it?
No, I think he was like 8 years in, 8 years in at Clemson,
Yeah,
seven.
it seemed like he might be longer. Pete Carroll? No, Carroll was a head coach of the Patriots,
Yeah,
right? So it doesn't
in
count.
the NFL. Yeah,
Jimbo Fisher.
close. Jimbo's fourth year, so that's hope for year four, Florida State.
Dan Devine?
Um, no, he was a head coach somewhere else before. I don't
Okay.
know exactly where. I think with the Packers too, maybe, but he was a
Yeah,
head
the
coach.
Packers.
I don't know, Dre.
So I mean, Bob Stoops at
Oh,
Oklahoma,
yeah,
Wow,
Stoops.
second
good
season.
one.
And then this is before my time. John Robinson at USC in 78 in his third season, and
Wow.
Barry Switzer at Oklahoma in 74.
Would
Um,
have never guessed those. Good ones.
the other ones are well, Larry Coker, but an assistant for decades with Miami in 2001. And he was a
They
high
say
school.
the worst coach to ever win a national title. That team was so
Good
stacked.
stack. No, I couldn't include him in that. But yeah, the fourth year, yes, Jimbo, Gene Chizik at Auburn, Danny Ford at Clemson. So maybe more hope in year four. But I just think it speaks. And I was a guy as excited as anyone for Freeman. I think on the text thread, I was one of the pro Freeman. I think there were a couple. I'm gonna say Mike, you were probably one of them that not caught up in the hysteria, the momentum. I was hopeful for the recruiting, which has been a little bit better, not wholly better. The players coach, but I think we all acknowledge like you got to grow into the job. So I'm not looking forward. I'm optimistic. We'll get to my prediction progression, but it takes time to learn how to be the headmaster, especially in this crazy kind of
Well,
college.
since we're doing trivia, I believe guards can correct me. I believe the man most culpable for Brian Kelly not winning the national title in his third year will be in the building on Saturday.
Let me think on that.
Different directions that could go.
You? No, Elko.
Manti Te'o.
Colin Klein, Kansas State
Oh,
quarterback, is the offensive
oh,
coordinator
Wow.
at Texas A&M. And I think they got Andre, you and I actually we went to I think they played Vanderbilt that day. I think they got boat raced by Baylor.
We were
that's
watching that game
right.
in a bar in Chicago. Yeah,
And
yeah,
I do feel like ND would have stood a puncher's chance at the very least against Kansas State.
dude.
Man, that's a good call.
Football is circular. Um, all right. Any other storylines besides the head coach, besides Freeman, you guys are looking for this year? I got a
And
couple. Oh,
I'm
go ahead.
just trying to get used to. I don't know. I'm so glad games are starting because I've been kind of soured on the off season of college football. I feel like such an old man, but it's like there's not the cohesion. Like it feels weird that we just transfer in quarterbacks. So hopefully the team feels cohesive. And that's not a Notre Dame thing. That's all of college sports now. But so
I was
that's
gonna
a
say college basketball. I mean, tune into college basketball. I don't know who's on Duke any given year. So like,
yeah. And then I think the carrot hanging out there is how amazing it would be for Notre Dame to host a playoff game in December in South Bend. Like how just wild that would be.
dude, that's a big storyline. Yeah. That I mean, we don't even we're talking about what trips we're gonna make this year. That could be one, right?
Let's
The
go
first
twice,
one.
double dip.
That would be some heck of a ticket. So I agree with you. The whole playoff, the 12 teams, that's something to watch. And the transfer quarterback strategy too. This is now 3 to 4 years, right? We've
Yeah.
taken the transfer. Like, is this? And we got some guys coming up. You
So
know.
as a big ND football nerd, like
Mhm.
the word is this is by far the best quarterback room Notre Dame has had in a long time.
Mhm.
Um, I think the backup, whose name's escaping me right now, he's looked good when he's played. I think CJ Carr is supposed to be ascending as like a potential NFL level, elite NFL level quarterback, like first round pick quarterback. We haven't had one of those in a while. And so I think the storyline of the quarterback room, like, is that room actually ascended to a place that Notre Dame's quarterback room hasn't been in a long time, is interesting. Can we elevate above the Ian Book level of quarterback this year or in the near future? And then I think the defense is really good at every level. Defensive tackle game this year with Cross and Riley Mills is excellent. The cornerback room's outstanding. So third year defensive coordinator. So I'm interested to see if just Notre Dame is starting to turn out like regular elite defenses. And I think both an excellent quarterback room, excellent kind of defensive structure are things to keep an eye on.
We've probably never had a more experienced defense. I mean, maybe that's the fact because of the 6-year guys, because the COVID year. But I put a storyline could this be Notre Dame's best defense ever? And I don't know. I don't go back far enough to even know what to compare it to. But it's kind of upshot you kind of need if we're talking title. But there was a big push, right, to return Cross, Kaiser, Mills, Watts. That's 79 starts across those 4 players. They could have went in the draft. I don't know if they would have went high, and we'll talk about some more of the other players, but
I do. The Ags have a top 10 pick. They just snagged from Purdue. I think his name's like Scourman.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
It does feel like edge rusher. Of any of the perceived potential weaknesses for Notre Dame's defense, it does. They've got experience, but not. They grabbed a guy from Duke as well. That's an edge rusher, but it doesn't feel like necessarily they have a defined kind of dominant guy off the edge like they had in previous years with Julian Aquara or some others. So
Like
that's the only concern about
block.
whether grading them as a great Notre Dame defense is, that's a requisite to be great at this level of college football right now.
That's true. All right, let's look at some position groups. Just go a little bit deeper. Mike, is there any groups that you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I would say is, you would reflect on this in the fantasy football team that we're partnering. Like, I think Kyron Williams is like a super elite back that Notre Dame has produced. I think he's a step above anything that kind of came out ever since Reggie Brooks. I think he was just a more dynamic player in kind of elusiveness and in the passing game. But I think this running back room is like really competitive with like Notre Dame great running back rooms. I think, you look at Jadarian Price. I think he's just like a great natural runner. He's got like I would consider his vision, elusiveness to be like that of a typical great Notre Dame runner. And then I think Love is kind of this elite athlete. I don't know if he quite has the vision, but he's kind of his strength speed combination is just something that's unique to Notre Dame's running back room. So I feel like the running back room this year, particularly if we can block, in a meaningful way, I think that's a stronger running back room than Notre Dame typically brings to the table. And I think that room, particularly at the top end of it, is like high level, elite, championship level running back room this year.
Dude, I loved it last year. I mean, you had those guys, and then you had Estime. And so, but maybe better this year, like a little more narrow, let guys get into a rhythm. Because I felt like last year it was like this guy's getting 6 carries, this guy's getting 3 carries, but that definitely
There's something about Estime's feet. I just didn't love him. He was a little bit shattered those feet in the hole a little bit for my liking.
Yeah.
He definitely had some nice runs, but I like he just wasn't as sudden in the hole. I mean, I like my running backs a little bit more. He did estimate a great breakaway run against NC State, I think it was, that kind of turned the tide of that game. But I think this running back room is just, they can just do more things differently and be, I think, more consistent threats to hit a home run.
You still bitter we didn't draft Kyron Williams this on Monday?
I think Kyron Williams is, I think I love that guy. I love that guy in like a phone booth. I feel like you can never tackle him in a phone booth.
He's returning punts this year for the Rams. That was just announced. It's not the
Looking to get him on the field, got to
yeah.
do it.
Yeah,
It's so painful when you have those guys come through your programs. Dre, you see it at Duke when like you're like, man, how did we not win it for this guy? Like it wasn't Kyron Williams' fault, but like you want the pieces to be there for that guy to win it.
oh yeah, all time. Like what was that 90-yard run he had against? Was that against
Carolina,
Count? Oh, I mean that
unbelievable.
guy was so much fun to watch. So I'm with you. Yeah, running back's huge. James, any positions tickling your fancy?
Well, first of all, I love that we now just call these rooms, like they'll live in a house together and
I didn't know.
like bunk beds. This is kind of like the new thing. But quarterback is obviously huge. I think if you look at Notre Dame under Kelly and can Marcus Freeman break out of it is Notre Dame now churns out excellent offensive linemen. They're tight end U. They're pretty reliably good on defense, with this year's defense being elite.
Mm.
And Mike has said in years past is they're not recruiting athletes well enough.
Mm.
And I would throw quarterback into that mix. And, like personally, I think Riley Leonard's getting a little bit overhyped, but that's part of being the Notre Dame quarterback. I think you're taking like a above average ACC quarterback. And I don't think he's like an NFL starter at some point. And Notre Dame has not, I would like to look up when the last time Notre Dame had a receiver drafted on the first day of the NFL draft.
Not a tight end, a split end.
Yeah,
That. Old Bill Fuller.
Oh, Billy. Yes. My son has a Will Fuller signed Texans football.
But that's it.
He was a first round.
Kind of a niche skill set too, right? Like a top off the guy defense, not like a
Yeah, he was.
Yeah. He's a good example though of like you want a guy like that, like a true burner, and like Michael Floyd was probably the closest we've had in like the last 15 years, not as a burner, but like the NFL prototype of a receiver. So I'll be interested to see who steps up out of that group. I think they're deep. I just don't know who's really going to be the go-to guy, like when you got to have a catch on 3rd and 7 late in a game.
Who was our best receiver?
Wide
Who
receiver
was our best receiver last year? Who do you guys think it was?
Best wide receiver?
Yeah.
That was a really bad wide receiver team.
It's Faison. I give it the Faison.
Yeah, it was Faison. I mean, Rico Flores, I think played the most snaps. But Deion Colsey, surpassed. I mean, Jaden Thomas, I think Jaden Thomas had like a good game against Navy, and then like his hamstrings, his hamstrings were like my lower back after trying to do something athletic. Like it was like, oh yeah, his hamstrings don't work anymore, and he was terrible the rest of the year. So
influx.
Receivers super interesting, right? Like they got Faison back. Greathouse is projected to be a breakout. They've got a transfer Chris Mitchell. They've got Jaden Thomas back. So there's a perception, and then I can't remember the name of the guy they got from Bo Collins from Clemson. Yeah. So it's like
Harrison.
There's a perception that the room has gone from like below average to definitely above average. But Greathouse is meant to be like, is he an actual NFL level receiver? I think could be a big determination. And then I'm hearing rumors now that people think Faison could be an NFL level guy, I guess, of the great white receiver mold of Wes Welker and others, but they definitely could use some NFL talent out there.
The PLL is calling, and actually isn't Buckner's now, did he make the team as a receiver?
Well, now you're talking about the week 1 storyline. My prediction is like Notre Dame's only chance of winning is sneaking Buckner out for a double pass.
Oh, I like it. I like it. Yeah, receiver. At least the receiver now, they got some proven guys that put up stats last year in different schools, but at least they got something there. I wanted to double click on quarterback a bit with James, and Yeah, Riley Leonard, right? For my alma mater, I didn't watch a lot of him. The team wasn't really that good, and it's a different mold. He's an athlete type. He's not really a thrower, right? His career completion rate's 62%. College average is 63%. Yards per attempt, 7.2. The average is 8.2. Yeah, this is different than Hartman coming in, and Hartman didn't work maybe for a few different reasons. Mobility is Leonard's threat, right? 19 career rushing touchdowns, over 1,200 rushing yards in his career. We kind of saw that against our defense last year against ND. Didn't throw much, but he ran for 88 yards. Huge 33-yard. I don't know if it was a scramble or it was a design play that really should have iced the game. Really should have given Duke a win. So it's interesting. Like he has grit, he has mobility, things we really haven't had since Book. I
He's
don't.
taller than I realized.
Is he? Is he have height?
He's 6'4". I don't know why he
Book was
doesn't
like
play that tall
5'10".
to
Wasn't
me.
Book like 5'11" or something like that?
Oh yeah, he
Yeah.
was tiny.
So
I
I
have heard
bet on
NFL.
I
I
bet
have
on
heard NFL
Clemson
scouts
against
talk about. Oh, go ahead,
I
Mike.
bet on Clemson against Tennessee in the like the 2023 Peach Bowl, and Tennessee smoked them. So I bet on Duke against Clemson in the first game last year, and that was probably Leonard's best game
Yeah,
as a college player.
yeah.
He broke a very long touchdown run,
Mhm.
and like throughout the broadcast they were sprinkling in like Riley Leonard potential first round pick.
Mhm.
Um, I don't
Mhm.
think he played much last year. I think after he got hurt against Notre Dame, he didn't play again. So
He wasn't very good when he came back. FSU.
I think he's largely unproven,
Mhm.
but certainly he flat Clemson, as we saw, Clemson was a pretty good defense, and he definitely flashed in that game.
Yeah, it's just interesting. Like, are we going to more of a run game, more of an option run game? And like, do we have the offensive line for that? We got all these receivers. I mean, Leonard's less proven, I'll say it again, than Hartman. So like there could be more upside there. We're gonna be surprised. I'm curious what we'll see on Saturday.
So if you talk about position groups, right? I think Notre Dame has three championship level position groups. I think the running back room is championship level. I think the cornerback room is championship level, and I think the tight end room with Mitchell coming back is championship level. So to your point of like, is this is how will Riley Leonard live in the Notre Dame system? I do think from, Denbrock is certainly a skilled coordinator. I think the tight end room could be very big in determining how effective he ends up being, both in kind of helping a weak O line and also being kind of a pretty dynamic group in the pass game as well. So I think that's an interesting aspect of Notre Dame's offense this year, is how big will the tight end room be?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting storyline just in general that you've got the offensive coordinator who coached the Heisman winning quarterback, first round draft pick, and now he's got kind of a different style.
Mhm.
How's he gonna structure this offense? How's he gonna work around Leonard's strengths? So two new faces, and I mean you hope for chemistry. I'm also just interested to see how aggressive they're going to be on Saturday night. I don't know if we're ready to go to that
Right.
point yet, but
We're almost there. We're almost there for
yeah.
sure. I mean, also there's no Malik Neighbors on this team, or Brian Thomas Jr.
Uh-uh.
That's different. But Eddie, before I mean, we don't have to hit all the position groups. We kind of mentioned how the secondary really solid, defensive line really solid. Linebackers have Kaiser back, and I'm excited. Hopefully, see some of the younger guys step up. I mean, that's Freeman's forte in recruiting. You think. But any other comments on anything groups we haven't touched on yet?
I'll only say, I think Xavier Watts won the Nagurski Award last year. He had a little bit of a 2012 Manti Te'o season where like
Yeah,
quarterbacks just kept throwing him the
yeah,
ball.
yeah.
So we've got a new guy, Schuler, that's coming on as a starter at safety. Guy looks great in a football jersey,
Like
kind of like
you.
me. you know.
You're old school
But I think
scout,
that I
captain
think
an
I'm
old
just
school
saying, like,
scout body.
if people are taking Xavier Watts All-American for granted, I'm not quite sure he's that good. There's a reason he didn't go to the draft, right? So I think we got great corners, and we've got a really good defense. Our coaching has seemed to be very good in the defensive backfield, but I'll be interested to see if our safeties are as good as they looked last year.
Who's the safety that dropped the interception against Ohio State? It was a safety, right? That would have clinched the game. That wasn't Watts, was it?
I don't know that.
Remember at the
We don't have
final drive? I mean,
that
we had so
picture's
many
like
chances
stapled
to win
in.
that game against McCord. And I remember
Yeah.
that towards the end, but close. Okay, let's look at the schedule real quick. We talked about how it's been viewed kind of weak. Um, for folks listening, right, it's at Texas A&M, it's versus Northern Illinois, at Purdue, versus Miami of Ohio, versus Louisville, versus Stanford, versus Georgia Tech, versus Navy, versus Florida State. Wait, Georgia Tech, I think it's in Atlanta, right? That's a neutral site.
Yep.
I guess that's more their territory. Versus Florida State, versus Virginia, versus Army at USC. What do you guys, any spots in there, any potential trip ups? Any of your reactions on the schedule?
Well, it's college football. I don't think this is uniquely Notre Dame. One of these games that looks like a layup is going to be closer than it needs to be. Like you might lose it. I think Georgia Tech, after we saw what they did in Dublin, that's a potential trip up spot. Falls in an okay spot in the schedule. You know, it's after Stanford at home, and frankly, I think Notre Dame might outnumber Georgia Tech fans at that game in Atlanta. So neutral, but I think it's going to be like a Notre Dame home game in Georgia Tech City, which is amusing. And then I don't know what you're going to get from a program like Virginia late in the season, but they might be looking to play spoiler. And then I don't know. Ending the season in LA is always it's fun, but it's tough against USC. So with their retooled coaching staff, I don't know. I mean, I think 10-2 is the expectation. And some people probably think the expectation should be higher than that. And you look at some of these games, and if they trip, Freeman's in trouble. Like, you can't lose to Purdue. You can't, like, this Louisville team coming at home, like, team's got to be geared up for that. I mean, Stanford, come on, like, got to take care of business.
I think you're looking at the schedule, doing a quick draw. So let's only count teams from the Power Four. They face 2, 4. I think they're facing 4 Power Four teams that are making a bowl game this year, right? I think Louisville makes a bowl. I think Georgia Tech makes a bowl. Florida State, A&M, and USC. So, I mean, you know, broadly speaking, it's a schedule that as a fan, it's a bad schedule.
Yeah.
It's reflective of the fact that Swarbrick picked the wrong horse with the ACC. He should have signed up with the SEC. Schedule would be way more fun if we played 6 SEC teams this year.
Was that on the table? Was that on the table?
I don't know if it was on the table. I'm just saying, like, these ACC games aren't turning into rivalries, and it's just a bad college football schedule, and we've had to deal with it for 10 years. And to layer in games against this mediocre ACC against Northern Illinois, Miami of Ohio, Purdue, Navy, and Army, it's just not. I don't want to be dour here, but I mean, like, you know, college football's fun when you play in good games. So there's just a lot of bad games on the schedule.
Yeah, it's a brutal schedule. I mean, it's a brutal schedule because it's like not interesting.
Yeah, I think I said so. College Football Network had it the 57th ranked strength of schedule out there. I mean, we're never down that low, so it is. It's a good point. As a fan, it's disappointing. It should help us with the record, but everything's picked by the eye test anyway, so you think that balances out.
You got to find middle ground because there's been seasons where I think Notre Dame scheduled way too difficult, or they slotted games in bad spots. It's like you play a really physical team after you play Navy, and
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that's always a recipe for disaster.
Well, the big storyline middle last year was all the night games in a row, right? The four straight at home
Yeah.
to Ohio State, at Duke, at Louisville,
Yeah.
home to USC. It was kind of whining, right? It's like, play the game, and I get it, they're college kids, but still, like, play them where they are, and you kind of see it. Not many night games. As a fan, at least especially when I went to games, hate a night game. Maybe I actually prefer watching night games now, but really they do not have many night games so far. I think they made a point of that. Um,
Well, I think Notre Dame didn't have a night game until we were in school.
USC was the first
yeah,
night game. Crazy train.
that's true. That's true.
I think Matt Barkley
The
converted
USC.
like 42
Yeah.
third downs against us in that game. It was 2011 was not Notre Dame's finest hour.
All right, we're getting the Zoom 10-minute warning. Yep, that's the level that Cleats by Dre is recording. So let's do our preview, and we'll do season-long predictions. A week one preview, A&M on Saturday. James, I want you to go last because you got the insider take on both teams. Mike, you want to take first shot prediction for Saturday against A&M?
Yeah, I think a left tackle going against a defensive line stacked with talent is too much to overcome. Uh, I think the defense holds up, but I think Texas A&M is solid at the quarterback position. They've actually invested more in solving their own O-line problems than Notre Dame. Um, and so I think Notre Dame is done in by a raucous crowd and an O-line not ready for prime time, and I think they lose 24-13.
Yeah. I'll go next, and we're gonna tip it up for you, James, because Mike and I are both some dour dudes right here. So it's interesting, right? First of all, the Duke connection, Elko and Riley Leonard going at each other in the first game. I don't know how much. I think Elko is actually on record, right, saying that more advantage for Riley because Elko's defense is more of a known entity than Riley in the Notre Dame system. Um, but I just hopeful, but I think ND loses. Like I need to see the Freeman team go on the road and win a big game before I predict it. And I'll say that without knowing too much about A&M's team this year. I'm going to learn from what you're about to say, James. But like it feels like a defensive battle. Take the under. I feel unfortunately like 17-14, Aggies. But what do you think, James?
Yeah, I mean, well, last year too. I mean, road game at Duke, road game at Louisville, road game at Clemson. The offense like no showed. So I mean, the prove it factor
The
with
rah-rah
Freeman.
games, right? The rah-rah USC last year, Clemson the year before. He can get the boys up in a big way, high ceiling, but I want to see it on the road.
Yeah, it's a tough game to handicap. Loving both of these programs and both that always let their fans down. I think both fans are like, this is the type of game we lose, like both fan bases are saying this, so something has to give. The line is stuck at 3 right now. You call that maybe home field, and so a wash on teams. I think I expect also a low scoring game. I expect both offenses to play relatively conservative. If Notre Dame gets a big turnover and plus territory, maybe even scores a defensive touchdown, I think they win. But yeah, I think it's a 3-point game either way. And if Notre Dame weathers like the first 15 minutes and settles in, I think it's a coin flip game. And I think that's how it's handicapped. Now, A&M's quarterback will be a top 15 pick. He's legit 5-star recruit, got hurt early in the season last year, big arm. So high expectations for him. But it's also the first game of a new coach. The new coach is as bland and as vanilla as they get. He's just a football guy, loves defense. And So we might see some punts early on from both of these coaches. I think Freeman likes to punt too. He talked about it on a part of my take this week.
Jim Tressel and the punts.
Yes.
But you haven't you've waffled, you've vacillated, but you haven't
So
put enough
James,
money
last
down.
week, right? Last week on the Pat McNamara, hope you're listening, buddy. Our gambling preview video. I saw a 23-17 Irish. Are you
Yeah,
sticking with that, or are you gonna?
I'm sticking with it.
Okay.
I think Notre Dame's defense is the deciding factor, and it just takes one turnover. You can get it on A&M's 20 or you score, then the game's flipped. And so I think that's going to be the difference.
It'll be good just to have that back. So let's
Before we wrap up, Dre, since I'm going to the game,
yeah.
any tailgate tips? Like if I run into like a Texas oil baron, should I be ready to hand out a resume? Are there particular drinks, that I should be ready to talk about? Like what's the tailgate scene gonna look like down in College Station?
People are going to be super friendly. I expect you to get a lot of free beers. Um, that's just A&M. It's almost obnoxious how they try to, it's like they're kind of they brag about how nice they are a little bit. There's gonna be a lot of beautiful girls around. It's gonna be hot. But it's a macro domestic beer type of school. So it's gonna be a lot of Miller Lights. And yeah, I think I don't know if the true oil barons know what a resume is. So I don't think that's going to help you either.
There you go.
Maybe
I should let them know that
a handshake and a
my
good
golf
joke.
game's under development. I'm not ready to
Yeah.
hit a course with them yet.
Let's do super quick season predictions. Mike, go ahead.
Let's say just quickly, I'll say slightly disappointing season, 9-3. I think I think the O-line is a work in progress, and I think the team is very good, but I think relying on six starts at offensive line is too much to overcome for this team to realize their potential this year.
James?
I'll stick with this 10-2. I just don't know where the losses are coming. They're in there. I think USC is going to be, if they piece together their offense. I don't know if Notre Dame right now wants to get into a track meet with them, but waxed them last year in South Bend. So I think 10-2, and I just wish I could circle where the losses are.
Is that above the line or below the line, you think, for the playoffs?
I think they're in. If they're at
If they're in at
10-2.
10-2, they're in as 11 or 12.
I see. I have them 10-2, but have them on the wrong side. I just think with the way it's with Florida State not looking that hot, and maybe Georgia Tech looks a little hotter, like the schedule. I don't know. I feel like the perception. I feel like we'll get screwed somehow. But I have a loss in the first game, so I have one more screw up the rest of the way. I guess James, you have two more. I just think it's going to happen at some point. I don't see the consistency. Brian Kelly, love him, hate him. By the end they were beating all the bad teams. No screw ups. They couldn't win the playoff, but so I'm 10-2, maybe 9-3, but I'll go 10-2. Not in the playoffs. And God, we might be the most pessimistic Notre Dame.
Yeah, we're not going to get any repeat listeners based on this.
Yeah.
Will Marcus Freeman be on? Will his seat get any warmer if they're 10-2 this year?
No, I don't think so. I think 10-2.
10-2 against this schedule is not a great season.
I always say, like, it depends how the losses come and when they come. I'm like, if he's, let's see, if he's 8-1 going into Virginia, Army, and Southern Cal and loses two of those, I mean, he's not going to lose the Army, but like if that's where he trips, his seat's going to be scorching hot. That's a lot different than losing to A&M in week one and then like losing to, like, I don't know.
I should say, by the way, your guys' prognostication is incomplete. I said 9-3, which is non-playoff. They're going to beat BYU in the Mormon Procreation Bowl. 42-16.
All
So
right.
10-3, beating a bad BYU team. You guys are 10-2 qualifying. Are they losing in the qualifying round of the playoffs?
I don't have them making the playoffs.
So out of the playoffs,
Yeah, and I don't care what bowl game. At that point, who cares what bowl game? And they'll start Angeli again, and
potentially 11-2 with a showdown against McMillan and Fafita in an elite
there's the
non-playoff
Servite
bowl.
stuff.
Okay.
There's the Servite stuff. All right, we're gonna wrap, boys.
Guards, are they winning a playoff game or are they losing?
Guards.
Yeah, if they go 11-1 and they host, they're definitely winning because they'll play a bad team.
All right, guys, this has been a blast. Let's just enjoy having football back. Mike, James, thanks for joining. Enjoy the games, guys.